Helping out a rugby club is always time well spent. Your local rugby club needs more volunteers. Go on, get involved.
Welcome everybody, my name is Sheila Begbie, I'm the Director of Rugby Development at Scottish Rugby. I just really want to say to you thanks so much for taking the time to register for the webinar. We really appreciate your time and hope that you find the webinar useful. What we're going to do today is to provide more information on the documents that we released on Friday, which was about phase 2 of Return to Rugby. So just in terms of the webinar details, all the slides are available afterwards and the webinar recording will be available for you as well. If you want to submit questions live, then you can use the Q&A function and we'll try to respond to as many questions as we possibly can. And then we'll follow up with an FAQ document as well. So just in terms of the agenda for today, myself kind of take you through the first few slides to give you a bit of context of what's happening. We've then got our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. James Robson, who will talk about, or who'll give you a COVID-19 update. Then we have Chris Hildry, who's our Head of Regional Development. Chris will talk about the COVID-19 safety coordinators that we've been communicating with clubs around. And then we'll finish off with Neil Graham, who's the Head of Training and Education, and Neil will talk about activity and coaching guidance as well. So just to give you a bit of a context around where all of this fits in, we are obviously driven, everything that we do in rugby, so our restart to rugby, etc., will be driven through the Scottish Government's route map. So they will determine and dictate what we do and when we do it in terms of rugby. Scottish Government, as you'll be aware, are working really closely with Sport Scotland. So just to give you a background, that we are in touch with the Scottish Government and Sport Scotland on a regular basis in terms of progress against what we're planning in rugby. We have a Scottish Rugby Threat Management Group, which is chaired by our Chief Operating Officer, Don Mackay, and that sits above all other groups and kind of directs what we do around the professional game, clubs and schools, events, and even looking at our staff returning to BT Murrayfield at some point. That is again linked to World Rugby. I'm sure that some of you are aware of the World Rugby COVID-19 module that we're going to adapt and link to Rugby Right to support clubs only to do one module. And there's a lot of guidance and recommendations coming out of World Rugby as well. So they're a key player within all of this as well. So the context of where the information for the community game comes from, we've got a community game subgroup, which is chaired by myself. And of that subgroup, there's two further subgroups. So we've got a return to facilities, which is chaired by our colleague, Jen Griffin. So Jen is driving our whole aspect of what we do around facilities and support that we'll provide for you, the clubs, in terms of facilities. We also have the Return to Train and Play group, which is chaired by Neil Graham, and Neil will talk about the work of that group in a minute. And then finally, we're looking at Return to Rugby guidelines for both clubs and for schools as well. And part of that work will be driven by Steve Turnbull, who's our Regional Director in Caledonia Midlands. So without further ado, I think we'll crack on into the webinar, and I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. James Robson, to pick up for us now. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Sheila. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm sure none of us ever expected to be in the position we are just now. We've had many weeks, 13, 14 weeks of pandemic, and we've come from a very dark place with a high number of infections resulting in hospitalization for many to an improving picture. Neil, would you be kind enough to? So it really, you know, for all of the complexity of the pandemic, very simply, the sacrifices that you and your loved ones and everybody else has been and continue to do has resulted in the path to near normalization that we're experiencing now. So we've gone from lockdown, where we were all at home trying to stay away from each other, to now being able to queue for Primark in Glasgow this morning. A big change. That is down to the fact that we're managing to suppress the virus, and you will have heard about the magic R number. The R number, R naught, is the transmission rate of the virus. It's the rate at which any infectious person might infect 1, 2, 3, 4 others. And when the pandemic started, the R rate was thought to be around 4.5 to 5. So for every infectious person, they would infect 4 or 5 more. We're now in Scotland at a rate of 0.6 to 0.8. And that means that the number of people that are suffering from the virus should continue to fall. As you are all aware, the Scottish Government has started to very cautiously ease lockdown measures, perhaps a little more cautious than other parts of the UK, but absolutely to a T, this is the right thing to do. What we mustn't do is get carried away. As we come down out of lockdown, we have to be very careful that we don't repeat the scenes that we've seen around some parts of the UK with big groups mixing very close together. The virus has not, and it will not for the foreseeable future, go away of its own accord. It is only down to your hard efforts and sacrifices that we will continue to suppress and hopefully eliminate and eradicate the virus. Neil. So I would ask you to all be very patient. We will only progress through the phases of the return from lockdown when it is safe to do so. And being very cautious, given the fact that we are a contact sport, we may even be a little more slower or a little slower than the government allow us to be. We need a buy-in from you all. We need help from others to understand the why. Why are we proceeding with caution? Why are we starting by social distance running? Why are we starting by only using a ball and no other equipment? We need to do this in a stepwise fashion whilst the virus continues to reduce within the community. It's a team ethic. There is no other sport, as far as I'm concerned, like rugby. Rugby is the most sociable, the most bonding game that I have ever been privileged to be a part of. And the success of returning to rugby and returning to normal depends on all of us, particularly out at club level. And I would ask that you almost passively engage in social disapproval. We need to make sure that if we're exhibiting unsafe behaviours, that we call each other out in the same way that in the early stages of the threat from the virus, we were asking the national team to stop shaking hands, to stop hugging, and to move to fist bumps or elbow pumps, etc. It's all about developing good, safe behaviours. And if you see something that needs to be corrected, then speak up. I hope you continue to benefit from the government's release from lockdown, and I hope that you help us to make it as safe a transition to normal as we can possibly do. Thank you. Sorry, may I ask Chris to take over from this point?
Thank you, Dr. Robson. Good afternoon, everybody. So, appreciate everyone dialing in this afternoon, and just to start to expand a little bit of detail around how we're going to support some of the plans to restart rugby. So I'm happy to share some thoughts here around the COVID-19 safety coordinator's role. And give you an overview of the role. But I suppose before we go into the details, you need to recognise that we know there's a volume of volunteer roles already required for clubs to operate, and we're conscious that we don't want to overburden the clubs and the volunteers. But having said that, we think the COVID-19 safety coordinator role is going to be really key and very important in supporting the gradual and hopefully the safe restart of rugby. Neil, if you could flick on, please. Thank you. So on the right-hand side of the screen there, you'll see there's lots of we walk through the job description in detail. The role is online, and there's a lot of detail in there.
Chris, sorry to stop you, Chris. We've got quite a lot of people saying that they're struggling to hear. I think the feedback's quite bad. So if it's okay with you, I'll probably just take over from here. I think the quality's not too good. So apologies for that, Chris. It just seems that the internet up north may be struggling a little bit. So yeah, folks, the COVID-19 safety coordinator role is an absolutely crucial role within the return to play function. We have a full role description available, and I know a few people have already asked questions on the role description, so you see it to the right hand side of your screen there, but there is some further information available on that form, and there's an online nomination form as well via SurveyMonkey, and we've already had a really good response from clubs. Over 50 clubs so far since announcement on Friday have actually completed that, so thank you very much for those who have done that so far. The purpose of the coordinator is to pull together all the compliance elements of the COVID-19 risk assessment process, and really making sure that every club is in adherence to Scottish Rugby and Scottish Government guidelines, and you know, we're very much here to support that process and to support those individuals. We will have some initial online training this Thursday, and that training will be to go through some of their responsibilities and also be there as a sounding board for clubs that have questions on the role and function of the safety officer. But really, in terms of moving forward, the safety coordinator role is going to be absolutely crucial in all the phases. So although their role may be minimal at the moment, really we're in the preparation phase of getting the safety coordinator up and running, and in essence getting everything in the club up and running, so when we can move through the phases, we're safe to do so. It will be part of the minimum operating standards for all clubs for next season, so that'll be obviously a vital component of any funding moving forward. And we will have regular check-ins with the individuals to really help them through the process, and really to provide us with any feedback as well that people have on our return to play processes. I've mentioned risk assessments already. We've shared some template risk assessments online already for the club and school game, and this is an example of one of the risk assessment processes. Again, it's nothing that is too onerous for clubs to undertake, and really will be part of an ongoing process throughout this whole phased return. It's looking at what are the hazards within the club. You know, some clubs, some pitches may have been down now for 6 months or so, or close to that. So we just need to make sure that everything's safe, so when people do return, it's in a very safe environment where we are minimizing any risks of spreading the disease even further, and making sure we're obviously protecting our great game that we want to get back to. So that's the COVID-19 safety coordinator role. A few questions coming in around that, and again we'll try and get back to some of the questions at the end of this, and certainly we'll get back to all questions via an FAQ document at the very end. Also, we'll send it out after this webinar. So yeah, Chris, apologies for that. I had to jump in there, but fingers crossed that got the message across okay. So I'm just going to hand over to myself now and go through some of the phase 2 guidelines. This is around the activity and training principles around the phase 2. I'm sure a lot of you have seen our infographics that we shared earlier late on last week but we're just going to reiterate some of the key principles, and again cover off any the key points and any key considerations for clubs looking to get some players in training. So as of today, 29th, still status quo in terms of no organised large group activity, and that's really, really crucial. We are not back to rugby yet. Okay, no traditional training to take place. It's really an opportunity for us to ease very cautiously into players individually training at a club, if safe to do so. And this has to be outdoors, and physical distancing is still absolutely very much at the core of what we're talking about here. Training pitches can open, and I use the word can open because there are a number of pitches throughout Scotland that aren't owned by clubs, and they may be owned local authority, leisure trust managed, so there may be further implications of pitches opening out with a club's control, but there is the opportunity for training pitches to officially open. And we'll go on to some further information about what that looks like in a moment. But the key message is that if they do open, no more than 8 players in terms of a group size from a maximum of 2 other households, so 3 households in total, can be on a pitch at any one time, and they must be training individually. Okay, so this is not, again, it's not touch rugby. There is no passing of the ball, and this is very much individual training for fitness purposes, really. From a facilities perspective, all indoor facilities are to remain closed, and that includes toilets. And as you will have heard from the First Minister's announcement last week, all outdoor catering facilities must remain closed as well, although there are dates for those to reopen later in July, and we will be submitting further information around that point this week. So that's really, from a phase 2 perspective, the key points of on-field activity. So from a pitch reopening perspective, we've talked about pitches should only reopen if it's safe to do so, and Dr. James reiterated that point at the very start. We should only move within our own club environments when it's safe to do so. That means undertaking a full risk assessment with clear communication to members if a pitch is to open, and what the considerations are for members to take to that pitch. Very, very important that we communicate with all our members, even if that is to say we are not opening. If the choice is by the club to remain mothballed, if you like, and to pitches to remain closed, that should be something that clubs should look to do immediately and almost at each phase. Physical distancing and hygiene measures should be in place, and we have a detailed checklist and information on what that may look like. So, for example, there are pitch layout diagrams that I'll show you in a moment that indicate how a pitch could be laid out. Just examples. Hygiene measures such as hand washing stations, sanitizing stations at the entry and exit points to a pitch should be in place, with clear messaging from in terms of posters to indicate to members what they can and cannot do. A check-in and check-out process needs to be in place if a pitch is to reopen and members to start using it for training purposes. The reason behind this is really to support the NHS in the contact tracing process, so that if anyone within that group is tested for a coronavirus and has a positive test, then there is an opportunity for the NHS to trace who that person's been in contact with, and again that can help us stem any transmission of the disease further. Sharing, players can only travel locally, still for leisure. That's a current guideline, and that is within 5 miles of the club. And again, just talking about the 8 people maximum from 2 other households, just to reiterate that point. No small-sided games or passing of ball. We are really strong on this point. You know, the passing of a ball, as Dr. James said, is critical at this stage. That we're not at the stage where you can pass a ball between individuals, unless obviously from the same household. So we're really looking at this phase only being for individual fitness and skill sessions only, but it's a start, and it may be an opportunity to get people back in small groups to start some of that fitness training, which I'm sure a lot of people have been looking forward to. Social distancing of 2 meters at all times. And as I said before, just to reiterate the point of these restrictions or these opportunities may not apply to everyone due to the ownership and operators of some pitches. So that time may be required in some instances to conduct further risk assessments and to liaise with other bodies before opening pitches. So please ensure that you are fully aware of all of these situations before considering any opening. There is a detailed checklist on the right hand side there. We have it to download, and all these slides will go out. So there's a checklist that as a club you can go through before making the call to open a pitch or not, and we'll circulate that after this webinar. So some further information on the check-in and check-out process. We have a download available on the website. And that is a Word document, very simple to use. It just asks players to check in their time and date, etc. And really it asks for a couple of questions around about their exposure to anyone with COVID-19, have they travelled internationally, for example? And obviously if they answer yes to any of those questions, then they shouldn't train. We need people to stay at home if they are showing any symptoms whatsoever of the virus, and really to be hard on that from a club perspective to get that message across to players that they should only train if fit and well. We have some online options, so we'll share a Google Sheets online form option that as clubs could be of use for that check-in and check-out process. And we also, to the right-hand side here, just showing an example Eventbrite option. So Eventbrite is free to use for all clubs. You can set up the training dates and sessions, and people in essence would then buy a ticket to a session. And you can then check them into that session, and they can also check out again. So that's an opportunity for you to keep some data online. It's all in compliance with GDPR regulations, and that's quite an effective and simple way to check in and check out players. And I said before, it may be that during this phase, as a club, you choose not to open. That's absolutely fine, and you're right to do that. What we sort of advise is that these check-in and check-out processes will be a factor of future phases as well. So it's really important that you, as a club, try to get some of these processes in place so that when you do look to start up activity, you can start pretty effectively. So from a player guidance perspective, we have all this information I'm about to show you now in a poster format. So that poster can be printed off and then obviously printed out, shared with your players, put up on the pitch side before they enter, etc., and emailed out to them. But there's some key information in here that I just want to go over. I probably won't touch on all of it, but just some key pieces I've not touched on already. Because of the strict physical distancing measures, before players arrive at training, they should be allocated a training slot. So scheduling is going to be really, really key to ensuring that we don't have players from different households crossing on entry and exit times to training. So they need to have an allocated time slot within your club. Like, again, can we link to the online check-in process? We advise that players go through an NHS self-help guide. And when you click on that link on the screen, it will take you to an NHS link site, and that asks you a number of different questions around about your symptoms, if you're showing any symptoms, and again, it's just another mitigation for us to avoid people travelling to training if they're showing signs of COVID-19. Only players from the same household can travel together, and really we're trying to avoid using public transport at all times. Critically, at the bottom left-hand side, players need to arrive changed, as again, all indoor facilities will be closed and cannot open at this point. So they need to arrive changed, and then subsequently cannot get a shower at the club. They need to leave immediately. So Yeah, on arrival, I've covered a lot of that content already. Just really that hygiene side of things about no hugging and fist pumps, etc. at the start, as Dr. James said. We want players to really get in training and get out is the core message here at this stage. Okay, so during training, we need to allocate individual training zones, and I've got some guidance on that in a moment. Maximum groups of 8, exercise alone, no equipment sharing, and as we said before, adherence to all physical distancing measures. After training, as with everything we're doing at the moment, whether it's going to the shops or anything like that, washing our hands thoroughly afterwards and sanitizing any equipment that may have been used, whether that's a piece of personal equipment. Obviously no equipment sharing is crucial, and leaving immediately after training, so showering at home is the guidance we're giving out to players. Okay, so from a coaching perspective, some guidance on coaching. Coaching can take place, but it should be very much age and stage appropriate. We understand that there's going to be a lot of players keen to come down to training, but it needs to be planned. It needs to be safe to do so. So we need coaches who are delivering sessions that are age and stage appropriate to all of our members. Coaches shouldn't deliver training to more than 2 households at any one time, because they will count them as a third household, so therefore only 2 others, and no more than 2 households per day. And again, that risk assessment process is absolutely crucial. Regarding pitch layouts, a couple of examples here, and in the downloads online, we have some further information on this. These are just example pitch layouts for individuals to train. It's really critical that you do mark out a pitch in clear zones, and that those zones are clearly identifiable to players who are arriving. So maximum of 8 players per pitch if they are from maximum of 3 households, but commonly if players are traveling from one household, it may only be 3 or 4 players per pitch in that situation. So we're really advising clubs to have a lot of distance between those training zones, but coaching can take place on that pitch as long as the players stay within their zones and physical distancing is met at all times. Okay, so that's really the key guidance from a physical activity and coaching perspective. Just before I hand back to Sheila to wrap up really in terms of this current guidance, I was going to talk through maybe just some of the timelines of where we're at the moment. So we have the obviously webinar at the moment that we're in. This week we'll announce some further catering guidance and that will be on or before this Friday coming. Because the Scottish Government announced that outdoor catering units can open as of the 6th of July, so that will come. We have an announcement of phase 3, again to be confirmed, caveated, on the 9th of July from the Scottish Government, and that will indicate further guidance on the fact that groups can meet in an extended capacities, and likely that some households will be able to meet indoors. So we will seek further guidance on some of these areas on the 9th and 10th of July. A number of people have asked questions before the webinar, and I see a couple coming in at the moment live, that there was an announcement last week around about organised contact sport resuming for children and young people. Really clearly in red there that we are seeking further information on this from the Scottish Government and Sport Scotland. We will seek to issue guidance to clubs on this matter in due course. But at the moment, it is very much phase 2 guidelines. There should be no contact training for anyone at any age, and we should be following phase 2 guidelines until further information is announced. On the 15th of July, there is an indication that indoor hospitality can open, obviously as long as certain criteria are met. So again, maybe an opportunity for clubs to look at opening of some indoor facilities. And again, further information will be given out before that point. We then move on to the end of July, and the end of July, phase 4 government announcement is planned. And again, prior to that point, we will be issuing guidance when available on the easing of our restrictions relating to the Scottish, our phasing of return to rugby. And that will include very similar details to what you receive at the moment, so an infographic, supplementary documentation, and any details relating to the key areas. So that's an overview of our timeline over the next month. As you know, this is a very fluid situation. We may well receive information at intervals that we're not aware of, and we will certainly work hard to provide information as soon as we can to clubs and schools on the return to rugby protocols. Okay, so that's everything over now. I'm just going to hand back over to Sheila, and probably Sheila, just as you're maybe wrapping up, I can have a look at maybe some of the key questions that have come in, and maybe we can try and pick off a couple before we break.
Good. That would be great, Neil. Thanks very much. Well, folks, I hope that this has been informative for you. And as Neil says, do see a lot of questions coming in from you. So if we don't manage to answer your questions on the webinar just now, we'll make sure that we get back to you with a response. We'll do a Q&A that we'll share with people. A number of you have been asking also about the slides being available. So we'll make sure that the slides are available from tonight. So you will be able to download the slides later on. But just really to say that this is a really difficult time. It's a challenging time. And we know a lot of you are volunteers that have got lots of other roles in your life. So we will try to take some of the strain away from you, in that we will be working tirelessly to try to provide as much up-to-date information as we possibly can for you. And what we'll also do is to undertake on a regular basis, probably on a weekly basis as we go forward, to provide webinars for you, so that the information that we release on a Friday, that we'll look to do webinars where we can invite you in and again share information, and if it gives you the opportunity of actually asking questions and having the questions that you might have clarified, to make sure you're doing the right thing and keeping young people and everybody involved in your club safe. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to register. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And Neil, do you want to pick up a couple of questions just before we head off?
Yeah, there's a lot of great questions coming in, so thank you very much for submitting them. And we will group them together and theme them up and put some answers together and circulate it around everyone, and probably put that on the web page as well. A lot coming in around about the maximum numbers of people that can take part in activity on a pitch. So just to stress on that matter, it is a maximum of 8 per pitch, but that can only be 8 if they are from maximum of 3 households. Okay, so if you have 3 players coming from 3 different households, the maximum is 3. Okay, so that's the key bit of information there, that it can be up to 8. You would obviously have to have players from the same household to form an 8. You know, so 3 from one, 3 from the other, 2 from the third to make an 8. That is the maximum, and that's in line with current Scottish Government guidelines. Okay, if there is a coach on the pitch, they count as 1 household, so therefore the maximum may be reduced if that's the case. Okay, so that's our guidance at the moment, and that's really just, as Dr. James pointed out at the very start, it's to ensure that we have enough physical distance between players on the pitch, so that we're not risking any physical contact between people from other households. So that's really a key bit of information there. Just around about PVG, Sheila's coming in, actually just about coaching and PVG. Is the PVG process going to still be the same as it was last year? Answer is absolutely yes. There is no difference in terms of the PVG process, safeguarding process. All youth coaches will be required to have a PVG or scheme record update before they can actively coach. That's absolutely crucial. We have got some information in the summary document that we circulated and is online around about safeguarding. So please have a look at that. But yeah, absolutely all safeguarding policies are to remain with no differences from last season. So they're probably a couple of key ones just to note at the moment, Sheila. I think the rest of them, unless anyone else has seen any, I think we can pick up the rest in an FAQ document afterwards.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Neil. So listen, thank you so much. Thanks for your time this afternoon. We look forward to being in touch with you soon. And as soon as we can pull together the FAQs, there's, as Neil said, a lot of questions coming in. So we'll try and answer these questions for you as soon as we possibly can. But take care and stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye, guys.
Helping out a rugby club is always time well spent. Your local rugby club needs more volunteers. Go on, get involved.